Kelvin Emmanuel, the Chief Executive Officer at Dairy Hills, is joining me right now. We're taking a look at President Tinubu's trip to COP28 summit in Dubai. Hello, Kelvin. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get started. Social media and, in fact, the whole country has been agog with people are not happy this time. Not too pleasant stories around the presidency in terms of the number of delegates that went to COP28. Are you part of the uproar?
First of all, I think the president has a very terrible communications team.
Really?
They are not
Terrible?
doing a good job
Okay.
at communicating. The president of Kenya, I was told, sent a list of over 100 delegates. Sorry, he was sent a list of over 100 delegates. He asked his people to trim it down, and it came to 51. And even at 51, Kenyans are still angry because the petrol subsidy was removed in Kenya. Petrol subsidy is also removed in Nigeria. And
is it really removed? Anyway, that's a conversation for another
day. That's another
conversation.
It, yes. And the cost of servicing the government to the size of the budget, I think, is over 5 trillion naira. The cost of governance is very high. Nigerians have been asking the presidency to implement the Stephen Orasanyi report to reduce the size of government. The government has still not responded. They've done white papers on that report. Over white papers, nothing has been done. Nigerians they've seen increase in the cost of energy, in the cost of food. You know, the amount of money, the percentage of your income that goes into food right now is over 90% for most of the country. And a report came out that at the end of the day, Nigerians have to rely on payday loan to survive. So it's important that the government tightens its belt. The government has said that officially only 138 people are catered for. In my opinion, I don't think that Nigeria needs to send more than 25 people to COP28. Apart from the special envoy, the president, 1 or 2 or 3 key ministers, Minister of Trade and Investment, Minister of Petroleum, the NNPC. Yes, Minister of Environment is very important for COP28 because it has to do with climate change. Minister of Water Resources, and 1 or 2 aides. I don't see the need for them to carry a full retinue of convoy. Moreover,
the issue around the question we should... sorry to cut you short. I need to bring this in. How about the issue of the presidential initiative of this compressed natural gas? Of course, the movement from fossil fuels right now to greener fuels.
Look, you can't do CNG without setting up mother and daughter stations.
Among even other things, renewable energy,
yes,
and all of this.
You can't do CNG without setting up mother and daughter stations. In fact, this issue about renewable energy and solar panels and wind turbines, we're having this conversation in Cape Town 2 months ago. And the issue about solar panels are not affordable. More so because of the exchange rate. They are not affordable because the beneficiation for lithium, aluminium, copper, the chips that are used in solar panels, inverter batteries, they are not produced in Nigeria. They are done in Europe, in Western Europe, and in China, mostly. And then you have to import at this exchange rate. How much are you going to land them here? When you need to change batteries, how much are you going to land them here?
I don't even want us to go into that conversation because it's a deep one. We can be here for additional 2 hours talking about that. But let's still stay within the discourse this morning, which is around the cost of President Buhari, President Buhari Sindaura, President Tinubu's delegates, delegation to COP28. So in your own view, they shouldn't have been more than 25.
They shouldn't have been more than 25 because the first question you should ask is, what is even the agenda of Nigeria to COP28? Look, I'll tell you what, China and the US are the biggest polluters globally.
Yeah.
Africa contributes 30% to global emissions. Why is Africa being asked to contribute equally to scaling back when the biggest polluters in the world are the US and China, right? Number 2, the petrol that is imported into Nigeria is dirty. SON is not checking. NESRA is not checking. The petrol imported into Nigeria has more than 15 parts per million for sulfur, and it has less than 80 parts per million for octane. It contributes to carbon emissions from cars and generators across Nigeria. So if for the basic thing on checking the sulfur content and the octane in the petrol that is imported into Nigeria is not done, what are we doing at COP28? What is the Nigerian government actually doing at COP28? The carbon emitted from the petrol that is consumed in Nigeria, in fact, to the extent where the European Union recently decided that it will not allow refineries in Belgium, in Netherlands, or any part of Europe to export out of the European Union any petrol that falls below standards that has been set globally. The Nigerian government has refused to take action on that. The European Union is taking action to protect the interests of countries like Nigeria and Africa. So what are we doing in COP28 if we can't address the most basic challenges that we have control over?
Now, the question is about $1 billion, close to $1 billion would have been spent or spent on even flight tickets alone. We're not talking about hotels, we're not talking about feeding and all of that. Do you also give the presidency some slack in terms of their defense, that civil society organizations are part of them, that's their members and all of that? Can Nigeria...
What I see happen,
or this thing is not even defendable.
What I see happen in terms of 1,411 is, look, the UAE government shut visas to Nigerians, and people used it as a racket to get the cover to access visa for the program. I don't think, personally, I don't think the government is paying for 1,411 persons to go to Dubai for COP28. I don't think so. I think the numbers are way less.
But the list came up.
No, the question is...
but that's the Nigeria delegation.
The Nigerian delegation, right? The Nigerian government did not pay for 1,411 people. But even at 138, assuming that that's the number they paid for, in my opinion, is still too much. You don't need more than 25 people to COP28. Because in my view, the Nigerian government does not have its own house in order. The most basic thing for carbon emission in Nigeria, we're not focusing on it. We have issues about gas flaring in the Niger Delta. We have issues about pollution and vandalization of pipes, bunkering, that is leading to we not reaching our OPEC quota, that is damaging the environment. We have issues about the HREP, hydrocarbon remediation program, that is a contribution, a counterparty fund between international oil companies and the Nigerian government. At the last count, I heard reliably that there were allegations of procurement fraud and the issues of the Nigerian government not contributing its own part to the counterparty fund that has been set up to clean up the Niger Delta. These are basic issues that talks about carbon emissions and control. If we're not dealing with the basic issues we have control over, what are we doing in Dubai? What are we doing in Dubai? Why are we not telling the leadership of COP28 and the United Nations that, listen, Africa needs fossil fuels to industrialize, just like the West and the Far East had done, right? And that we cannot talk about energy transition without addressing the fact that, number one, Africa contributes only 30% to global emissions, and Africa must be allowed to industrialize before the West takes it off.
Do you think that African countries have come here with a united voice? Because if you take a look at, let's domesticate it a bit. If you take a look at Nigeria, the ETP, Energy Transition Plan, that was launched by President Buhari, was it last year, 2022, we need about $410 billion to be able to do that. Between that time to 2060, which we need about $10 billion annually to do that. Do you think that, I asked a question earlier, how should Africa even approach these issues of industrialization? Because like you said, China, Europe, and the rest of the West have industrialized with their different energy sources. Now they are telling Africa, no, we have climate change and all of that. What should be the alternative? How can Africans be smart about putting, their demands forward? That's one. The second thing is that with President Tinubu now at COP28, with what he's doing, what do you think he should bring back home in terms of perhaps green financing, in terms of climate financing, in terms of these are the amount of monies that we'll need, over $400 billion within from last year till 2060?
I'll tell you what, I was speaking with the permanent secretary for the Ministry of Minerals and Mines for Uganda, and she told me, she said, the Ugandan government is going to start producing 210,000 barrels of crude oil next year. The operators have built a pipe from Uganda to Tanzania because Uganda is landlocked, yes? And that the Ugandan government is contemplating whether to build a pipe to export its oil to Tanzania seaport to take it out for export. But the government has decided not to do that. The government has decided to keep its crude oil and refine its crude oil. And that a few years ago, they started talking to the operators about the possibility of raising $4 billion to fund a refinery in Uganda. Uganda is currently having issues raising $4 billion to fund the commercial refinery to refine the crude oil that it will start producing from 2024, right? See, Africa needs to understand that it cannot look to the West for financing of projects.
Really?
It cannot look to the West
Where do
because
we now look to?
Africa needs to use its own resources.
But
Africa needs to stop taking its own money and taking it out of Africa and then expecting the West to finance its own projects. Because the West and the Far East will always use this as a bargaining chip against the continent.
But in what way can Africa...
It's a game of chess.
Yes. In what way can Africa now develop if it uses its own resources? Because I suppose that Africa will use its own resources or sell its own resources, even as it's doing now in its primary state. But what we're saying is that don't even do that in the primary state
In my
now.
suggestion to the Madam PS of the Ugandan government, I said, listen, if a smart way to finance a $4 billion refinery is instead of you to go to the international capital markets or look to reliable partners like the Afro-Exim Bank that was very instrumental in financing the Dangote project. In fact, the first $450 million Alhaji Aliko Dangote got for that refinery came from Afro-Exim Bank. The first $450 million. Instead of you to look that way, why don't you come with a plan and sit down with your operators and say, listen, we're going to ask you to advance us $4 billion and net it off from what they call the joint venture cash calls over a period of years through amortization. That is a smart way to finance that project. And you have calls like this in Namibia because NAMCOR is also going to start, oil production. Namibia has about 3 million people in South Africa, right? So Namibia has the option of either exporting its crude oil, channeling its gas to LNG and channeling some of its natural gas to South Africa.
And they said they don't want to do it the way Nigeria is doing theirs.
You said?
They said they don't want to do it the way Nigeria has done theirs.
Because Nigeria has not been very
good
very
example
smart. It's not a good example
on the continent.
And I'm surprised that in 2023 of our good Lord that the Nigerian government is talking about getting the Saudi government or Baker Hughes to come and invest in government-owned refineries that, in my opinion, should be stripped down and sold as scraps, and allow private sector companies to lead the charge for refining crude oil.
Okay, Kelvin, as we end this session, what do you think President Tinubu should bring back? Because he will come back to the agitations and anger, dissatisfaction of Nigerians. And you mentioned earlier that his media team is not handling this well. What do you think President Tinubu should bring back? Can he be able to convince us this is a country now that is facing hardship? Petrol subsidy, we have partial petrol subsidy, food prices have gone up, a whole lot going up. The festive season is coming, a lot of people are very angry, rice is not cheap, and all of that. So a lot of anger in the land.
In Hiroshima early this year, G7, they came out with a communique to keep natural gas as a transition fuel. Mr. President has Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline. The FID is 25 billion. Nigeria is supposed to contribute 12.5. He doesn't have that money. The president should look for investors to invest in Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, NMGP, to start the process of procurement and construction. Engineering design is done, right? So that Nigeria can raise money to fund internal infrastructure for gas pipe. Because, you see, gas is critical and is important. And the more you focus on the upstream, midstream, and downstream infrastructure for gas, the better we'll be able to address the issue of affordability for PMS and diesel. And the better we'll be able to move towards clean energy. Because if you have more on-grid electricity, you have less people using diesel generators. You have less people using petrol generators, right? If you have gas, you'll be able to set up infrastructure for compressed natural gas. If you have pressure metering and reduction system in the southeast, just like you have it in the north central and in the southwest, if you have it in the northeast, you'll be able to have infrastructure that will power gas generators, infrastructure that will power CNG buses and CNG cars across Nigeria.
Okay. Okay, I think we'll leave it at that for now, Kelvin. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And this COP28 is about 12 to 13 days, so they're still in Dubai as we speak. Thank you very much. But I know that everything we're saying, President Tinubu is hearing. His handlers definitely are hearing what Nigerians are saying at this time. Thank you very much and have a good week.
Thank you.